I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on February 14th, 2020. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live, love to have you join us in our chat room right above the video window there, and it'll take you to a YouTube instance, and you can log in. If you are listening after the fact and have any questions at all, just send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe if you're on YouTube. You can subscribe. Make sure you get an update every time we publish a new video. If you're listening or you listen to podcasts, we have a bunch of these available for you. On any podcast player, just search Gallup Webcasts, and you can find this Called to Coach there. Jessica Dawson is our host today. Jessica is a learning and development consultant here at Gallup with me. Jessica, always great to have you on Called to Coach. Welcome back.
Oh, excited to be here, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are talking today about personalizing development through CliftonStrengths. And as we get started, let's just kind of ask if the basic questions, like how do we define development, and how does personalizing development help?
Yeah, great questions. So super important to understand what development means. Roseanne Liesfeld wrote a blog post, and it was called encouraging you to go beyond name it, claim it, aim it. And I think she really just knocked it out of the park. And she basically is encouraging us to go beyond the first step, right? So I do think that name it, claim it, aim it is a fantastic framework. It is a great preliminary step for you to understand what your strengths are, have an awareness of the power and edge, and then also be able to aim your strengths. I think what sometimes can happen is there can be a misconception of what aiming it is and what development is, right? So aiming it is more so what's happening in the moment, right? And then development is what's happening over time. And it really is a lifelong occurrence, right? So going from what's possible to excellence, it's very different than what's just happening in the moment. So we know that excellence is developed by repeating a strength, right? And so development is that process of exploration and also the journey of unpacking your strengths. We know that they endlessly unpack, right? There's, I know I took my strengths back in 2009, and I still have a new discovery every single day, right? I mean, partly because I do a lot of teaching and coaching and I'm kind of immersed in this stuff, but then also just because our strengths are really boundless.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to make that distinction.
Any athlete knows the value of practice. Professional athletes around the world, whether it's American football or football around the world, or cricket or any of those sports, they know. I'll throw rugby in there for Australian friends. They know the importance of practice. When we think about the actual performance being the aiming, when we come back to practicing this, in your opinion, in your view, in the past, what does that practice look like? I mean, how do people practice these before the actual performance? What kind of things can they be doing? What kind of activities can they be doing to really drive this practice forward and not have it to be able to separate the two between practice and aiming?
Yeah, I think one of the first components of really getting it right is to understand when you're actually at your best and what that looks like. So I know in part one we talked a lot about this notion of the mental rehearsal. I think that that's a really important thing to do, just to be able to take time to study what excellence looks like for you, and also understanding what does it look like when my strengths fall flat, right? And having an understanding of what that looks like. Because really, when you take the delta of when you're at your best versus when my strengths are falling flat, that's going to be monumental in terms of the practice. One of the things that we don't want to do is practice practice in a way where our strengths are being flat,
Mm,
right? So if
mhm,
we were to take an athletic example, if if I'm a person and maybe I like to run track, right, and I'm really good at running track and getting to the finish line, there's a big difference with um, running up on my heels, which is the correct way to do it, and then running, flat footed. I'm still getting to the
mhm,
finish line, but am I doing it
mhm.
in a way that am I practicing in a way rather that I'm in that space of excellence, right? So understanding when you're at your best is important. I think the other thing to just be mindful of is there are certain catalysts that can really take you from talent to strength. Coaching is a great way to do that because we know again that strengths operate best in relationship to other people. So coaching is going to be great for stretching your thinking around your strengths, holding you accountable, helping you to get unstuck, and maybe have more of an ability to define what your strength is. Right. I also really love this notion of having a board of directors, right? So I know, Don Clifton talks about this in the book, Soar with Your Strengths. And by the way, I mention that book a lot because it's one of my favorite books in life. Um, but even this notion of having a career board and a few people where you can just kind of have this back and forth dialogue about your strengths, how you're utilizing that strength towards a goal, right? And it's a little bit different from coaching because coaching is more so that coach is pulling the potential out of you. In these board of directors conversation, it may be a little bit more consultative, and it may also be a little bit more of like banter, right? Just banter back and forth, where maybe you are helping that person and that person is helping you. There's a vested interest on both sides. And there are these conversations about, in general, how are our strengths showing up in our lives? And how can we be more intentional about doing that? So I think the relationship piece is a great way to develop strengths. And also from a personal standpoint, right? Relationships are very personal. Right. So you're going to be personalizing, you're going to be customizing, you're going to be showing a level of vulnerability as you're deepening the relationships with those people as well. And I think lastly, mission is another great catalyst. So strengths develop just monumentally from the aspect of personal mission, right? Personal mission really does fuel strengths. If you've ever talked to someone who's maybe really goal oriented, maybe I've coached a lot of people that, their life from the outside really looks like it's all together, right? But when you pull back the onion layer, there's a deep yearning there. Something's missing. There's a yearning for deeper meaning in one's life, right? So understanding what your personal mission is can also be a great way to personally develop your strengths, because anytime you can take your strengths and aim them towards your mission, you're not only going to deepen your talent, but you're also going to leave your unique and personal impact on the world.
Yeah, I love the idea of mission in the context of the board of directors because I
Mm.
think as you're looking, some people will say, well, how do I find this board of directors? Like, where are
Yeah.
they? In the financial space, right? Board of directors' job is fiduciary responsibility for organizations as they grow, and they're required because of their public companies, right? That's kind of how it
Hmm.
exists. Well, I love that idea of bringing people on in your life who have, and maybe it's not just fiduciary, but maybe it's
Hmm.
also they share a common purpose and some common goals, and they have your best interest in mind, right? And by the way,
Hmm.
if you ask somebody to be on your personal board of directors, that's always an honor. So like, people aren't going to say no,
Yes.
right? They're not
Right.
going to say no to that. We have this form in our kit that helps do this. Again, you don't have to have the form to get it done. Our coaches know how to do this really well. This is where getting a coach is helpful. But these board of directors then are there to really help in that area. Adding mission to that and gathering a board of directors that's kind of has a common purpose, common goals, common mission, I think is a great way to start. Any thoughts on that, Jessica, as we think about actually forming that board of directors?
Yeah, I think it should be people that you feel comfortable around. It should feel authentic. And also, it may just be something that happens naturally, right? So if you think about the people at your, if you work, there's likely people that are your go-to people, maybe people that you like to bounce ideas off of, maybe people that when you have a hard day, they're the people that you can go to and really have a candid conversation to re-level set. It could also be people outside of your work. So, friends and family that really kind of get you and again have a vested interest and that is genuine in you and want to see you win. Right. So, I know in part one, we talked a lot about the feeling, but a lot of times you can pick up on whether or not when you're having a conversation with someone, is it all about what they can get out of the conversation? Or do they also authentically care about you? Right.
Yeah.
So I think that you got to look for that authenticity. Um, and there may be some trial and error here, right? And it's okay not to get it right all at once. The other thing I'll say is you can have people that are on your board of directors that serve as different purposes, right? So maybe you need to have those tough conversations.
Mm.
Maybe you want to have a soft conversation. Maybe you just want someone to ideate with, right? So
Mhm.
you can have people that serve different purposes, much like in the fiduciary sense.
Yeah, and I think, this is the difference between coaching and consulting is that,
Hmm.
your board of directors can have some true consultants on it who are really just
Yes.
gonna say that not that coaches don't say the truth, but their
Yeah.
purpose is a little bit different, right? And what
Right.
they're trying to dig things out of you and self-discovery and getting you to work through some things. Yeah, with a board of directors, you can get some true consultants who just say, "Hey, in my
Hmm.
opinion, this is the way you should get it done." And
Right.
that's your choice whether you take it or not, but that consulting role, it's in there, this is my advice and I think you should do it this way can be very, very helpful in your own personal development. Again, that can work in concert with a coach and saying, my consultants or my board is telling me this. And a coach can work through that with you. How do you feel
Hmm.
about that? How did that make you feel? How did they write those types of questions to be able to work it through? So I think that concert of coaching and consulting and the consulting
Hmm.
coming from that doesn't mean those lines can't blur or cross, but Jessica, I think you've set us up really nicely as we think about those roles in there for continued development in
Hmm.
what we're doing. How else can we, as we think about this idea of practicing, right? Of practicing this, what other tools, what other tips do you have as we think about moving forward with this?
For sure. Um, I think where we go from here is getting really tactical, right? And we said this in part one, but I think it's just such an important point to constantly stay curious about who you are at your best and stay tuned into those times where maybe you fall flat or maybe you fail, right? You want to be practicing those successes, right? Um, yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, yesterday I was on site with a client, and we were just talking about like how our strengths can sometimes be superpowers,
Mhm.
right? And I don't know if anybody has ever seen the movie X-Men. I know it's super popular, so likely. But if you remember, like Cyclops, which is the guy with the eyes, right? When when he was really young and his superpower was underdeveloped, he would just open his eyes and he would just like blow things up, right? And it took a little bit of time and refinement to really harness that power, right? So I think the practicing when you're at your best. So Cyclops was at his best when he was maybe blowing up a building that maybe stopped an enemy, right? And as opposed to just letting it kind of free fall or free flow rather, right? So I think that it's understanding how to really harness your strengths, but also consider when you're at your best, right? So environment, right, and culture, right? So you may have times where you were in an organization and you just didn't thrive, or in a department where you just didn't thrive, and all it took was you to either switch to a different organization or switch to a different division or department within that organization, and you took off. right? So paying attention to the environment, the culture, the people that you are around. Who are the types of people that are around when you are at your best? Are you someone that's maybe really great at being in a fight or flight type of situation where maybe people are doubting you? Maybe it's a little bit more fast paced, maybe it's a little bit more challenging, right? So, who are the people that you need to surround yourself with? I think that also ties back to the board of directors, right? What is the impact, right, that you're making when you are at your best? And for some of you, it might be I'm making an impact on people and changing lives of people, and maybe it's a little bit more selfless. For others of you, impact may look a little bit different. Um, and then again, I know we talked a little bit about this before, paying attention to how you feel, right?
Mhm.
So when you're practicing, taking all of those things into consideration is important just to make sure that you are practicing in a way that when you have the repeat behavior, you're creating the environment and the situations that are going to get you that success.
From a tools perspective, you mentioned the
Mhm.
IDP, but,
Mhm.
we've got some great stuff in the All-34 report that I think sometimes gets
Yes.
overlooked as well. You wanna just highlight those quickly as we kinda bring this in for a landing?
Yeah, the All 34 report is great with action items, and then also blind spots. So I think it's a great place to start to do some exploratory work. And I think a lot of times the action items spark ideas of other things that you can be doing to really ignite that strength and really bring it home. Um, and then, aside from the Clifton Strengths All 34 report, um, this is something that Jackie Merritt, one of our master coaches, has done in the past, and I think that it's so powerful. And I'm challenging myself to do this this year. So she actually will, and she does have high focus, by the way, but she will focus on one theme for the entire year, right? So she will might have a year of achiever or a year of connectedness or a year of focus, right? And it's actually being really intentional about building that strength throughout the year. So for me, my 2020 is all about connections, right? So I am going back and rebuilding my board of directors. I'm getting in touch with people that I have lost touch with over the years and rebuilding those connections, um, both internally at Gallup, but then also outside of Gallup, right? Um, this year, that's part of what I'm doing. I'm also, connectedness is a lot about questions, right? So I do a lot of yoga, I do a lot of meditation. So I'm kind of like leaning into this strength to practice utilizing it. So
Yeah.
that's something else that you might utilize.
I'll also, throw out we've been doing Mike has been doing some talent mindfulness exercises at the end of both season 6 and season 5, a complete series there, on Theme Thursday. And so I think that's another great way. Those are not necessarily driven for or made for one specific theme, but as you're focusing on those themes through this idea of mindfulness, there's some
Hmm.
exercises that you can do, there as well. So if you're coming across this and you're new to Theme Thursday, there's another opportunity to kind of practice your themes. That's in there. Jessica, anything else you'd add before we close it up?
Well, I do think sometimes it can be hard to wrap your head around how to practice. And if you're getting questions about it as a coach, I think it's very personal to understand what to practice and when to practice it and how to practice it. Um, so take the pressure off yourself if you're getting these questions and pose some questions to the client, right? To try to see how we can narrow down what does it look like to you. Um, and I think that that's a great spot for us to be in as coaches to keep our clients curious.
Great advice. Jessica mentioned a bunch of things in this, and you're like, "Oh, where's all those links?" We've actually have a post, the edited version of this. We'll have a post available. If you're on YouTube, just look in the description. If you're in the podcast player, just look at the notes for the podcast itself, and we'll have a link to the post that has a full transcript and all the links to everything we mentioned here. So if you're wondering how to get to these things, we've made it pretty simple for you on the edited version. We'd love to have you go out there and do that as well. With that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available. We'll have these links in there too. If you want to take advantage of our new Gallup Access platform, head out to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. A lot of great written resources, blog posts, webcasts, just about everything that's out there is available out there at gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to us so you get notified when we post something new. If you're on the podcast side of things, don't forget Gallup Webcast. Just search that, any podcast player, and you will find us. You can do Called the Coach too. That's another way to get that done. Sign up for our new Clifton Strengths newsletter. That's available over there on the site as well. Monthly updates of everything that's going on in the community. It's just a great way to stay connected if you like to read and do it that way. If you had any questions about anything we talked about today, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Come to one of our courses or come to the summit. We're doing a pretty awesome summit June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd here in beautiful Omaha, Nebraska. In May in Omaha is actually, or I mean, June in Omaha is absolutely fabulous. So you want to come out and join this. GallupAtWork.com. Get signed up. Come out and join us. We'd love to have you do that as well. If you want to stay up to date on everything that we do from a live perspective, gallup.eventbrite.com is the place to go. Just follow us out there, and I'll send you an email whenever we publish something new. Jessica said early in this, really strengths grow best in the context of a community, like when we're doing this stuff together. Let's do it together on social. So join us on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/called-to-coach, or if you're not Facebook, and that's okay if you're not, no judgment, no shame. If you're on LinkedIn, join us. Clifton Strengths trained coaches. You don't need to be necessarily one of our trained coaches, but you can join us in that group as well. Clifton Strengths trained coaches. Search for that on LinkedIn. I want to thank you for joining us, Jessica. Thank you for this
Pleasure.
series here. Great to have you today. For those who
Great to
joined
be
us
here.
live, thanks for joining us. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.